I was interested in something that would properly build upon the great geological and geographical advantages that we had here. I also felt that the standard of development in Chattanooga was poor. It was my impression, having lived here all my life, that too many things were done on the cheap or the quick, and that given the natural beauty that we have and what our aspirations for the future might be, that we just needed a higher quality of development. And I remember when we had our very first meeting, which took place in my home, and with a reporter from the Chattanooga Times, who was there because we committed ourselves to open meetings, doing the public's business in the open. And we stuck with that for more than 3 years. I went around the table and I asked other people what their aspirations for our work would be. And one that stuck at that second and still continues to resonate with me is, I believe it was Sally Robinson who said, we need to build places that are free of history. And it was a stroke of genius because Chattanooga was one of the most polarized cities one could imagine. Not only black versus white, rich versus poor, mountain versus city, city versus county, urban versus rural, labor versus management. And this was the opportunity for us to start with a whole new slate. That whatever it was we did, and we didn't know what we were going to do, we didn't even know where we were going to do it yet. But that we would say, when this is finished, this is going to be a place that every citizen can feel proud of and feel welcomed.
Very often told story, dirtiest city in America becomes the scenic city, becomes the gig city.
Yes, it is the good story of industrial transition.
I mean, it really is pretty amazing. So I think a lot of times people don't realize how long things take. You can do a plan, you're trying to set the stage, and sometimes it just takes luck, it takes timing, it takes opportunity, and when all those come together, how pieces of that can start falling into place. So it has been a transformed city, and when you look at how much vacant land there still is, you know, anytime you see a surface parking lot, that is opportunity. And I think the next 10 years, we are going to be amazed at the amount of growth in downtown Chattanooga and may not even recognize it.
One of my favorite books is Alice in Wonderland. And when Alice gets to the Cheshire Cat, he says, which path should I take? And the cat says, and where are you going? And she says, I don't know. He said, then either will do. And I think the concept of vision helps people make decisions that tend to get them to the same place.
And so I think you've seen when cities and governments and foundations and companies have gotten together, and those are the three pillars here in Chattanooga, is government, foundations, and private enterprise. When they get together and use their checkbooks and their skills and their influence to revitalize something, the demand is just amazing.
We say Renaissance only in retrospect.
There was a time when Chattanooga was in the top 10 of manufacturing cities, and that sounds like a great thing, except if you look at that list of top 10 cities, it was cities like Cairo, Illinois, Flint, Michigan.
That's when the large manufacturers left, fading away and buying from companies in other countries. And most of the large industry here went to foreign countries.
The head of the Chattanooga Hamilton County Regional Planning Commission said that the last successful downtown plan was in 1966. And at that time you had 4 banks, 3 insurance companies, and 2 department stores who were all located here and had their headquarters here. So literally, he said, within 10 to 12 people sitting around a table, he could make economic decisions, and they had the force to make those decisions work. By the early 80s, all of that was gone. You had the dispersal of power and money had changed how you had to do business.
You couldn't see. It was so black. The air was so black. And then just a bunch of old, ragged out buildings. Dead movie theaters, dead department stores. At night, nobody went downtown. You just didn't do it. All the thugs were downtown, and you just didn't want to go there. And that's really not been that long ago.
After the deindustrialization in the 1970s, right, and the really ravaging effects of the beginning of globalism, right, the Renaissance probably kept things from being worse, or say the bottom from falling out in all of Chattanooga.
And in the next few years, I was able to witness a tremendous amount of change. And a lot of that change happened through some very intentional events that were either educational or planning oriented. And they brought people together in new ways and asked people to look at the community in new ways. So I think what we did in that period, 81 to 84, say, about who we are, what we are, quality of life, a new concept. What does quality of life mean? What do we want our quality of life to be? Or it might be a 3-year public planning process, which the Moccasin Bend Task Force led, which had a national consultant, made us look at ourselves from many different angles, look at the whole river. And in doing that, we realized we had turned our back on the river. The river had been our dump. But turning back to the river, we saw the river as our life force. And it made us look at the valley where we were in a different way.
We had 65 public meetings, some huge, some not much bigger than the conversation we're having now, but 65 over a period of 3 years. And I think it would be safe to say that we blanketed the community.
It doesn't sound so innovative now, but in the mid-1980s, we did it a little differently here. We decided to start with people and have people engaged and involved in rethinking the future of the city. And so we were one of the first visioning processes that I know of anywhere, and I've been keeping track of it for quite some time.
2,500 citizens of Chattanooga met in Memorial Auditorium, done in tables of 10, so that everybody had an opportunity to be heard. The thing that made it work is that the political process followed the people's interest. And I think we accomplished something like 80 to 90% of the goals of that.
And we began to rewire the social networks of the community, because there hadn't been a way for people to meet each other, take action, work on projects together, form committees, task forces, and all those things began to happen across racial and class lines. Some of the things were small, some were large. Some would take many, many years, some could be done pretty quickly. For example, the very first thing that was done from the goals of Vision 2000 was a spouse abuse shelter.
And so when people say, what was the first thing that came out of Venture? And I tell them that, they look a little startled, really. We thought it was all about fun stuff, glitzy and glamorous stuff with the riverfront and downtown and so forth. No, nothing fun about a family violence shelter, but if you don't have one, so Chattanooga got over that hurdle and got it done.
It began, I think, with a transformation of the civic spirit. It didn't get put on somebody's desk and say, go do these 40 things. It wound up going to a lot of different places where people said, that's our work. That began to transform the actual physical space of the community. And of course, that had the additional effect to ultimately create a new economic picture for Chattanooga. And that is the part that we've sort of realized last.
And there are some people who still remember what those specific, commitment portfolio items were, but most people don't. What most people remember was the overarching vision of revitalizing downtown and reconnecting with the river. And those have been incredibly powerful because all sorts of organizations and, like you say, successive elected administrations have participated in those overarching visions. Our efforts are complementary.
Well, as a somewhat cynical journalist, I must confess I was skeptical that just bringing people together, talking about it, was going to make a big difference. There was a real sense that a lot of talk about a Lookout Mountain power structure that a few people of wealth and affluence sort of controlled Chattanooga. Probably overstated, but there were certainly elements that if you didn't have a certain number of key people or businesses or wealthy individuals behind a project, it probably wasn't going to happen. Well, to the credit of the leadership of that era, I mean, they brought a lot of those people together and said, we're going to listen to what comes out of this venture program, try to, where we can, put some resources into that and make that happen. So we reclaimed downtown in a way that a lot of mid-sized cities didn't. We had the advantage of trying to keep people here because a lot of the geography of this region, it wasn't possible to expand outward in the suburbs as like a lot of cities do in other mid-sized towns of America because of the mountains and all. But we've kept our major corporate headquarters. The Tennessee Valley Authority's power headquarters is here. Unum, the largest disability insurer, stayed downtown. Blue Cross Blue Shield, the state's biggest health insurer, has. Cigna and the utilities and the banks have all kept their headquarters downtown. A lot of cities, they've migrated to suburban office parks. That simply didn't happen.
And that's well and good, that's great. But why do we have to have some kind of extra governmental planning effort through any organization or nonprofit to take the place of what should be real democratic participation in the decisions as to how city resources are spent and meted out? And into what policies and directions the city is going to take.
And what I realized is that we needed new places that had no history, of segregation, that weren't black places or white places. They were new. And so we could recreate our history. And that was so important to our community, but I think also to the South as a whole, that we generate new places and new ways of coming together.
You know, having grown up in the 80s and the 90s here, you know, the aquarium was just a really big symbol of sort of saying, hey, you know, we had the urban flight and we had an empty downtown, and the city leaders, you know, mainly Jack Lupton, sort of said, no, the downtown's not dead. We have this beautiful river. We're going to put a stake in the ground, and they did the aquarium in such a way that it was kind of a bit shocking to the rest of the community, but it really opened our eyes up as a community consciousness that we can do these things.
I remember we sat around and said, we cannot break ground for this transformational building and program with 9 guys and gold shovels. We have to do something unique. And so that's when we concocted the idea of hooking up 5 D9 bulldozers to the building that was sitting where the aquarium was going to be. And they pulled the building down, and it created this mushroom cloud of dust and noise, and the crowd went crazy. But it was so spectacular and such a powerful beginning to that project that I think people really said, get out of the way, this is getting ready to happen.
For the most part, it was a wonderful experience watching them build the aquarium. There was a lot of resentment in town over the aquarium. A lot of people didn't think it was a good idea, but it was a good business decision on Jack's part. And, you know, I think that started the public-private partnerships that are still thriving here now. It means everything in Chattanooga. It was the brainchild of several men, but Jack Lupton was very influential with that group, mainly because it was his money. And without that public-private partnership, they just didn't have enough money to do it. And they were talking about reviving an entire city. This city's since become a model for that.
So when the plan was developed, one of the strategies said there needed to be an organization that got up every single day in order to make that plan a reality. And that's, you know, a lot of times where plans fall short, right? Because there was so much land available, we really acted like a land bank. We bought up almost all in fact, we had 34 acres of property downtown on the riverfront at one time. And I think that was really important for us because we had the land, we had the plan.
And that was big money. I mean, people look at the entrepreneur groups now as doing something new and extraordinary, and they are to a degree, but they're not taking near the risk that they took back then because these infrastructure costs They took years to get the money back.
In fact, there were people like my old cohort Bill Sutterth at River City who constantly challenged us as we were opening the aquarium, then the IMAX, then the Creative Discovery Museum. He kept saying, what's the new ride, the Disney vernacular, after that very intense period of development, at which point we said, well, this is okay because we can catch our breath. And I think it was a time to reflect.
The detritus of a previous industrial age was scattered all over the city, and people couldn't wait to get out of it. And that has all been cleaned up. It's remarkable what that does. And then it creates this environment where then you build on top of that this gigabit network and you have something extraordinary. You've got really the taste of a new world here.
It took a long time from where Chattanooga was in 1969 when Walter Cronkite told the world that we were the dirtiest city in America. But I know Mr. Rouse was right. He's no longer alive, but I wish I could go and shake his hand and say you were absolutely correct. It took us 25, 30 years to turn around not just our attitudes, but a lot of things about our quality of life that now is almost feeding on itself. And it's given us a problem from how do you deal with a city that's declining to a city that's growing, and then the even more serious problem to a city that's growing rather rapidly.
That since the aquarium was built and opened in 1992, we've had $3.8 billion in private investment in our downtown. Once you have a lot of success, you've got to be careful about where that success leads. Just making sure that it's not for the short-term buck, it's for the long-term. If you look at it as an investment in your city, an investment in the community, then it will pay major dividends if people will be patient.
And it's okay and it's great to develop those areas and those communities, but I think the big thing is to just not forget the people. Yes, we want to renovate and we want to beautify downtown, but a lot of the things that we do there can also begin to come here. If part of the initiative there involved adding more tourist-like attractions, then that's something that we need to do there. If there was a movement downtown to begin to have small businesses come in and provide incentives for them to actually move to Chattanooga, then we need to move that here because there are large parcels of land all around this community that could be used for something great, that could be used for parks, that could be used for better health clinics, that could be used for a real grocery store that people can actually shop at. And so although what they're doing is great and we 100% support it, we also hope and pray that this community will not be left behind and forgotten, and that
after the aquarium, the build-up started immediately around it and then went across to the North Shore. And the North Shore was a large part of the viability. As soon as it started on the North Shore, the bank started lending money. Quite frankly, it got a lot of us in trouble because it was too good for a long time. I remember many times in my own career, worrying about the bank because we had overborrowed and overspent to try to keep up with the development. And I knew there was a bust coming, but it still didn't affect us nearly as bad as the rest of the country. People came here with cash looking for a bargain. Then the real estate business became very good again. They knew the city would come back pretty strong.
Well, I think the simple economic rationale for a tourism economy is that if you're bringing people to your community, there's something going on there that's worth coming to see. And that's why we were able to say to the naysayers, and there are always people who look at a tourism economy and go, that's nothing but burger flipping, bed making jobs, and it doesn't pay any money. It's not sustainable, it's not real. In and of itself it isn't, but as a strategy towards something larger, I think it's a great way to go.
There have been major turning points where a group of people focused resources on something strategic, and then the next project built on top of that project. And really in recent years, I think we've kind of reached a critical mass where we sometimes are able to do 2 or 3 things at the same time. And a big piece of that puzzle was what came to be known as Enterprise South.
Really, it was almost a 30-year effort to get the Army to give up the site, to clean it up, to make it available, and then to market it as an industrial site. They wanted to save it for something special, so they wanted really the auto plant, which is sort of the holy grail of manufacturing recruitment. That's been combined with some fairly generous incentives package. The initial Volkswagen plan had $577 million of incentives in terms of property tax assistance and road improvements and land clearing operations and other kinds of state and federal tax incentives that were offered to help make that possible. One of the most generous plans, almost $300 million of additional incentives now for the latest expansion. By some accounts, University of Tennessee's estimated over 12,000 jobs were added because of the Volkswagen plant here in Chattanooga already, and it's likely to be far more.
During the Volkswagen recruitment process, we had people let us use corporate planes at various times. When Volkswagen needed to fly in, they would, all sorts of things. It was amazing how many people cooperated. And they really felt, all of us really felt as a business community, that this was a community win and that we were all participating in it. The atmosphere in this city was like we had won the Super Bowl. I remember days leading up to the event sitting in, one of our little lunch counters, down-home lunch counters, and there were these two little old ladies, and they were talking about whether we were going to get the automotive plant or not. I mean, it was just something that everybody was engaged in.
So you can do at-scale manufacturing. You can take advantage of the culture of manufacturing here and have it repositioned through this kind of green mentality. And it turns out to be something that really gives me hope, at least, for what the future looks like.
Like, it felt like Chattanooga was changing, and it was either like you were going to be a part of that change or not.
Some people are saying that the Dynamo of Dixie's back. Some people are saying that we've got the gig, or we've got a tech boom or something. All those things are true. Right? Nobody's disputing those facts. What people are disputing is whether or not this renaissance that Chattanooga is now well known for trickled down or been experienced by the urban African American community, low-income service workers.
Yeah, we have a few too many service jobs. As we get more professional jobs and professional work that pays a higher salary, then we'll be better off.
And that's what we're always looking to do, is push ourselves a little bit beyond where we are now. Better wages, different kinds of technical skills.
Big problems that we have now, which were problems that we wouldn't have dreamed of before, are wage disparity, where you have very poor people, very wealthy people, and not a big middle class. That actually, we've had that for quite some time. But the changes in the economy have exacerbated it somewhat. One of the more recent problems, which it was beyond our wildest dreams in the past, that we would have so many people moving back into the city that we would have a gentrification problem. In other words, wealthier people coming in, crowding out poor people that had stuck it out over the years of decline. And so now those neighborhoods have become kind of trendy.
It was a guy came to Chattanooga 20-some years ago, and he gave a speech. And the first time I ever heard of weed and seed, he said it. I'm sorry? Weed and seed. Yeah. He said it. And I was like, what is it? And he told us what it was. They all moved to the suburbs. Everybody moved to the suburbs. Move out, let it run down, come back in, like the man said, and buy the property for a little or nothing, and then you revitalize. You know what I mean? That's wrong. That's wrong. You are revitalizing something on the blood, sweat, and tears of somebody. I think progress is good, but not at the expense of somebody. It shouldn't be at the expense of anyone. Everybody should be on board. Progress.
There are huge gaps in the inner city of South Chattanooga. For example, we know that 69% of households here are living at or below poverty level. And we know that a huge percentage of families are run by single mothers. Apart from that, we struggle with a lot of gang violence. If you go down the street to the Big H convenience store, or even on the other side of the street, you'll see gang members out there just doing transactions. And these are the same stores that our kids go to buy Frozens and to buy chips. So children aren't seeing their parents achieve, and they're not seeing good role models in their community. And because of that, they think that they cannot attain better. They think that they don't have access to those resources, and they start to think that good behavior or success or wealth is only associated with certain types of people or certain neighborhoods.
And this narrative says Chattanooga was the dirtiest city in the country. And then when all the jobs left overseas and when all the industry collapsed, Chattanooga, it cleaned itself up, became a green city. It invested in the arts. It invested in some public infrastructure downtown. They got Jack Lupton's aquarium. So it got all of these accoutrements, right? It got all the niceties. And in fact, what they'll say is, we did it in a democratic process. We had Chattanooga Venture, Vision 2000. We did it the Chattanooga way. It's just a different way of perceiving what happened. There's other things that happened, right? So there was the stories of the riots in the urban black community against police brutality. There's the story of, Brown versus Board of Commissioners, which found that Chattanooga city government was fundamentally racist, and where the federal government actually had to order a change of government. You won't hear some of those stories. You won't hear about weighty settles. But what you hear is that standard. Chattanooga was a really dirty city, and they got cleaned up, and the riverfront is really nice. And since all these multinational corporations are coming into Chattanooga, then that means that everything we've been doing for the past 20 years is right, and we need to do it more.
This was a ball field. All the way back to that tree line over there. This was a ball field. And then there was Satchel Paige, Willie Mays, Jackie Robinson. And they played in the Negro League. They played in this park. And this place has been dedicated, baby, 3 times. There is a plaque. See straight down there? And they got that one little arch there. That's original. That arch is original. Lincoln Park, Chattanooga's first playground for the African American community, was dedicated April the 12th, 1918. Okay, rededicated this day, September 14, 1996. They're real at it. I'm telling you, dedication is no thing, It used to mean something, but not really. Lip service. And then 2013, the mayor, Andy Burke, dedicated it again. You think, okay, look like after 3 dedications, something should come to pass. You know what I mean?
Downtown was first, then the North Shore, and then when they went to the South Side because they'd run out of room on the North Shore, that's when everybody kind of looked up and said, hey, we're doing really good.
This area of town that we're sitting in now is called South Side, right? Seeing this get re-habituated, and in large part, people say that startup mentality was a big part of that.
This, I think, had just been built. It was very, very recent. This was still, they weren't working on it at all. It was just a condemned building. And it was like industrial. I remember for a while, I remember rolling through here, and it was a rough neighborhood when I was a little kid. I remember we'd drive through here, and it was, because I remember the porn store. I always remember the porn store. Rent, for one, is a big, huge divider. I've called 2 and 3 bedrooms rent for $2,000 and $2,500 a month. That's exclusion. In my opinion, that's exclusionary rent prices. These are really, really, really new. That, I remember so what was up is when all of these huge townhouses, just before they were built, there used to be these really huge, like massive oak trees. I don't know, live oak maybe, in the neighborhood, and then they just chopped them all down and put new trees up.
All this has been over the last 10 years. Whole areas of the city just gaining a new life. Places that you probably wouldn't have had a reason to go to 10 years ago are like destination spots now. And so, you just watch that happen a little bit at a time. It happens a block at a time, a building at a time. And next thing you know, you've got something remarkable going on. And then regular traditional commerce follows that. And then there's, more foot traffic through an area, more restaurants, more bars, more entertainment venues, right? More grocery stores, drugstores. All of that stuff starts happening. And then next thing you know, you've got a full-blown neighborhood. And it all, just started with little things.
Create Here was in existence for 5 years. So it was economy, arts, and culture. I worked a lot in the culture, dibbled in the arts with make work. And the economy was CoLab, which is other people know as Springboard, the business planning classes, also known now as co-starters.
So as we bring in these higher level knowledge-based jobs, average wage growth goes up, but the cost of living, which is one of our biggest advantage, it hasn't doubled as wage growth doubles, right? So we're kind of, it's almost like a wave, and we're on the surfboard and we're managing to stay ahead of the wave. And I think as we continue to do that, and you look at the city, I mean, there's 15, 20, 30, 40 buildings. There's, I think, something like 1 million square feet of vacant commercial real estate in downtown Chattanooga. And a lot of people think of, oh my God, the empty buildings. That's our inventory, right? That's where we're going next.
But that's where the south side properties come in. A lot of that was commercial property abandoned when the manufacturers left. And we can develop easily for another 20 years without running out of property, as long as people want to keep moving here.
This area right here, they rebuilt all of that. What it used to be, and it used to be, it looked horrible, but I mean, it looks great now, But I don't know, man. I think it's just regentrification. I think it's white people moving from the suburbs back downtown, investing and rebuilding all of downtown. Man, they're moving back into the areas. Is pretty much where it's happening. And that's all you see. You look at all the condos. You look at, like you said earlier, you look at Main Street. You look at some of these streets, man, where you had a lot of problems. You get prostitution and all those issues, man. And now look at it. They're building restaurants and cafes and bars and stuff like that, man. Which only, if you go to any of them, only white people are at them. And, nothing wrong with that, but that's it, man. In the middle of areas that used to be like high crime and high problem areas, that's what's happening. Yeah. And black people are just having to disperse because it's becoming too expensive to live in those areas. That's all that's happening downtown right now. People are leaving the suburbs and coming back here, and that's it. They come with a lot of money too.
Going back, looking at the history of urban renewal and urban development, nothing that we're doing today is new whatsoever. There's nothing new under the sun. This is nothing more than repetitions on a theme. This happened back in the 50s and the 60s and the 70s in the West Side. And it was a huge part of downtown Chattanooga. Chattanooga had one of the largest urban renewal projects in United States history. And funny enough, now it's a food desert. Overwhelming economic forces move marginalized communities around on a little game board as they grab up the hottest commodity in Chattanooga that they're not making any more of. And it's not the gig, it's land.
So here in Chattanooga, because of the way we're doing this, our people are becoming homeless. Amen. And so I understand the need to gain the property for the betterment of the city. I get that. I get the progress is going to make our city a better place to live. I get that. But what I don't get is the recklessness and the way and manner that it's being done.
A lot of things you just saw and didn't even realize it was wrong. Your parents kept you so close, you didn't even realize. And then when you did, like I say, now that you know better, you want better. You do better. You think better. Everything is about seeing, You see it, well, that's wrong. But, hey, and all up Central Avenue, there were houses. It used to be business up and down MLK, Martin Luther King, west and east. Businesses, black businesses. Used to be a black service station up there on that corner. Black business. Where are they? You see all these things and you think, what happened to it? What happened? What happened? And it hurts your feelings that it's not here anymore. I mean, my grandbaby didn't see it. My daughter just barely, because she used to come out here and play tennis and the.
So I think a lot of the people that live here now know that they've been left out of this renaissance, and they're bitter about it, and they've seen a lot of broken promises. But I think being able to create a platform for them to speak up and to give us their feedback and tell us what they like, and then be able to take that and knock on the City of Public Works door and get new sidewalks and street lights and bus shelters and the things that they asked for. They're now seeing that we have a track record. We can get things done if we work together. What we're pushing for and everything that we do is we have to work together on this.
What else are you going to do? How are you going to utilize civic infrastructure that's been underutilized maybe for a couple of decades? How do you rehabituate whole neighborhoods that were run over by economic waves, from global economic waves from past decades, right? Well, I think the natural answer is, startup businesses. You rebuild those things 2 or 3 or 10 people at a time, right? And they've seen the value in that. And they actively work it.
But the gig to me is like, well, people would ask me, how does it feel to be the mayor of the city that has the fastest internet speed in the country? And my response would be, well, I feel like I'm the mayor of the first city to have fire.
The VW factory was just a blessing, right? Of, you know what, everything else is going down right when we get a big hit, and so it kind of averaged out that, like you said, Chattanooga was able to ride out the storm. What did seem really intentional, and I think now with the benefit of hindsight was very forward thinking, was the gig network, right? Because at the time, the network was starting to roll out. EPB had plans for it. And in fact, when the American Reinvestment, I'm not good with acronyms, but when all the money came from the feds, that's why EPB got an outsized share of money for it, is because they already had a plan in place.
I tell the story as though we had the smart grid all built and then went, oh man, let's add. We were thinking about them both at the same time. People soon forgot that it really was an electric power project to begin with. There's a real cost to power interruptions. It's an inconvenience for you and me as residential customers. But when you think about a manufacturing facility, anyone who's trying to do business, you can estimate that our community loses about $100 million a year, and that we've cut the length of power outages in Chattanooga by about half. So once you have the network in place, you can also add the electronics to it that allow you to offer TV service, phone service, and very fast internet service. We also knew that we could help pay back the infrastructure. It wasn't until a little bit later that it occurred to us, why not just open it up and make it available to everybody and see what people can do with it? And it's working out beautifully.
Do we just build that smart grid with the implements that we have, or do we build for the future? And so we chose not to actually go head-to-head and compete with Comcast and the others. We gave them the opportunity first. I personally talked to their representatives that came to see me and said, we don't think you should do it. And I said, well, you do it, and we'll piggyback on your fiber system. And they said, we can't afford to. Well, they're doing it in some parts of the country, but they wouldn't do it here. So we did it here, and consequently, we have established Chattanooga as a leader in this new type of technology and this new type of infrastructure.
But in 2010, Google had been talking about how they were going to do a fiber project in some American city. And there was this whole process where cities were falling all over themselves trying to get Google to do it, there. And like Topeka, Kansas renamed themselves Google on April Fool's Day, all this kind of stuff. And in that time frame, the head of EPB, Harold DePriest, had come to talk to my boss at the time, Tom Ed Wilson, and basically told him that EPB was in the process of doing what Google was planning to do in terms of laying out this fiber, and they wanted to figure out how to translate that into job creation. And we discovered very quickly that the first thing we were going to have to do is persuade people that we actually had it. As we started to interact with people outside of Chattanooga, over and over again, we would tell them what we had, and they'd say, no, you don't. We'd send them the tech specs, and they still weren't persuaded. It just didn't make any sense that, this southeastern mid-sized city, not Silicon Valley, not super well-known place like Austin and in tech circles, but Chattanooga was going to be the first to do this.
Because the gig itself, is not that practical yet. I mean, it sounds science fiction-y to talk about, but it's so much faster and so much more bandwidth than anywhere else in the country. It's just hard to comprehend. It's hard to even use.
So if you think about electric power back in the 30s, when it first became available in homes, people didn't really know what to do with it. They knew that you could have light. You know, it would be a sort of a novel, cleaner way to light your home than a kerosene lantern.
The fact is that these ultra-high-speed networks are going to be requirements. And as we're entering into that place where more and more communities will have these services and the transport among these cities, I think Chattanooga becomes more and more important rather than less important. That now it is up to the city to say, as a first mover in this space, now that the space is being established outside of the walls of this city, what can we do? Once again, it comes back to one of the miracles of Chattanooga, where that help actually exists, and they'll lend that support. So that's what I would see as in its most abstract form, continuing work on the part of entrepreneurs to capitalize on these new tools they have at their disposal to make meaningful contributions to the supply chain.
Hey, maybe you know the best way to leverage the gig. Why don't you come here and use Chattanooga as your playground? But some of the other pieces that we talk a lot about whenever we're recruiting is the cost of living here is so minimal, but the quality of life is so high. So it's a great combo for getting people who want to live in a really great city but don't want to pay the prices of San Francisco, get them to move here. I really like to talk about the fact that as a young person, like the city, the world is your oyster. You can come here and start almost anything and get support, get funding, really find a great place to have a niche market and make that business scale from here. We have a lot going on here, everything from real estate investments to talent recruitment. And then the other layer of that is making sure our portfolio companies are happy.
We don't know what the direct return is going to be, but we want it to happen anyway. And we're going to lend significant financial support in the form of, I mean, sometimes they write checks, but the most important thing that they do is they let us use their people, you know? And it's just a tremendously impactful state of mind.
Really, the past 5 years have just been amazing. We have a totally different feel in the harbor city because of that.
I can't predict what it's going to accomplish, but I know it is, just like fire, that it's an element in our economy that we've just begun to explore. And the future is wide open in what it will accomplish. I just hope I get to live to see a lot of it, because I know it's going to be very dramatic.
But what's exceptional about Chattanooga is when we focus on something, we have tended to make sometimes almost miraculous progress. But even when it's not miraculous, some kind of progress. And we've made progress in education and in creating a pipeline of people who are prepared for technical positions. But I think everyone would agree there's more to be done. And I hope that's our next big breakthrough.
We believe at EPB that the foundational work that was done by Maybelle Hurley and Rick Montague and all those folks who worked together with the Vision 2000, the whole Vision 2000 process, what they did for us, really, besides all of the beautiful things that you see every day in Chattanooga that are obvious, but they also really helped us gain back our confidence as a community to be able to do big things, big things.
I would start by saying most organizations, chambers of commerce, corporations, foundations, look around and they think we can solve, there's a problem in this community, and if we build the right playground, if we build the Empire State Building, if we build a better hospital, we'll solve all the problems. And of course, that's foolish. But examples like that are what people gravitate toward, in my opinion, because they probably don't have the patience and they probably don't have the confidence in their own imagination. Don't mean to sound judgmental, but it's something that's finite. And what I think was a a beauty of the frame of mind of the Lyndhurst Foundation, and it didn't just come from me. All of the trustees were participants in this. It was a patient stepping back and thinking, okay, how will we start? We need to learn. We want to be taught. We're willing to be taught. And let's try some things that may be very different.
This community expects to be invited. They expect to participate. They expect to be asked. And if you don't ask, they get upset, very angry, and they'll voice themselves. So this community expects a high level of public participation and shows up.
It is such a collective effort, and just like everyone came together in the 80s, you know, all those different organizations, Chattanooga Ventures, and everyone that came together to beautify the downtown city of Chattanooga, it's going to be the same way in order to change lives, in order to bring hope, in order to break that cycle of violence and poverty and illiteracy and incarceration. It is just going to have to be a citywide movement.
Are we able to map this willingness to work together into the future, across generations, some of whom are just growing into the ability to participate, and also across a broader demographic? In the 80s, you know, and I'm not saying anything against it, but the community engagement that we're talking about was about 3,000 to 5,000 people. And we were in a situation where we had these foundations that had mega wealth. And so in order to do the aquarium, the private donations from the aquarium came from a very small group of people, mostly one, right? A lot of that foundation wealth has dissipated outside of Chattanooga. It's no longer focused here. The foundations are still really important, don't get me wrong. They do wonderful things. But if we're really going to keep doing what we've been doing in the past, we have to broaden out the engagement. The investment that's going to be required, where once it was a lot from a few, I think it's going to be a little from a lot. Both in terms of financial, in terms of volunteer engagement. If we're going to continue to replicate those kinds of big things that we did in the past, we have to shift our paradigm, and we have. We are moving toward a time when we are much better to engage, better engaging larger groups of people. And Thrive 2055 is a great example of that, broadening it to a regional basis.
You know, Chattanooga, luckily, there were some good visionary planners early on. But it's gotten to the point now where we're right on that edge.
I don't know. I feel like if we don't start looking at some of these urban neighborhoods, our city's gonna we're gonna go, and then we're just gonna stop. You know, like we keep chatting and talking about our gig and the tech infrastructure that we have. The people here don't even have a computer. You know, it's like there's a digital divide. There's a racial divide. There's a lot of divides here in Chattanooga, and you know, the more lists that we're on, and the more hipster and press we receive as being an amazing city. You know, I love Chattanooga, and I am happy that we're on those lists. But if one were to come to Chattanooga and then just drive 5 miles to the east and land in this neighborhood, they're gonna get a different feeling. And there's no reason why we can't start creating healthier communities. And it will change the violence. It will change perceptions. It will bring black people and white people together, and everybody be okay about it. You know, I think we have so much work to do. And I think you talk to other people and they're like, we did great, but I'm just sick of talking about our story. I'm ready to create the new story, the next story for our city. And I think that it's going to take these urban neighborhoods to make that story happen. And no, we don't have the answers, not all the answers by any means. Half of the things that we're doing out here, we're testing. But I think it's that risk that you take to figure this out, because obviously no one has the answer. And that's why this neighborhood's in the state that it's in.
City, according to the definition of the great architectural historian Spiro Kostoff, is a repository of conflict. And the conflict will always be there, because there are conflicting ideas. But what we have shown here is that we can mitigate these. We can put the community's interest above our individual interest, and we can use the same energy that could be combustible to try to make things better.
I mean, we're in the future now, you know. So, you know, did we get there? Did we reach our expectation? We're far beyond it. Far beyond it. But I guess what I could say that, and then also say what I hope we'll keep is that spirit of participation and engagement. Yeah.